I'm Glenn Campbell. Welcome to the first episode of my new podcast, Kilroy Cafe. This is my second podcast after Demographic Doom, which I've been generating for over a year now. That podcast is concerned with demographics, macroeconomics, and the future of the family. And this new podcast is intended for everything else. Now, who needs another podcast? Well, I need another podcast. I don't expect much of a following here, but I need a place to download my stuff. There's stuff in my brain that needs to get into the outside world, and this seems to be the best way to do it. After 2 health scares in the past 3 years, I'm concerned more about my long-term legacy than having a current audience. I've accumulated a lifetime of experience and hopefully wisdom, and one of my main goals now is to spew out as much of that as I can before I die. Now, I don't plan on dying anytime soon. At the moment, I'm at the peak of outward health, and I hope to keep it that way for decades to come. My health scare was lymphoma, a cancer of the blood, which was first diagnosed in July of 2018. It was cured by the end of 2018, but it came back in March of 2020, and it was cured again by July of 2020. And at present, I'm in remission. That means that no cancer can currently be found in my body. It doesn't mean I'm out of the woods, because this is the kind of cancer that is likely to come back. So it's entirely possible that lymphoma is the thing that kills me, but everyone dies of something, and it's just a matter of putting off the inevitable for as long as possible. My distress about nearly dying in 2018 and 2020 is that I had a whole lot of data in my head still to download, and this podcast is intended to remedy that. In the past, I've had 3 main methods of data download: essays, videos, and tweets. My written essays appear in many different forms, but the highest form of my art was a series of 69 one-page printable essays called Kilroy Cafe, published between May 2008 and April 2010. The name Kilroy was a meme from World War II. As American GIs traveled around the world, they left behind graffiti of a nose and 2 eyes peeking out over a wall, along with the caption, "Kilroy was here." The guy has only 1 hair on his head, which is 1 hair more than I have on mine. To me, Kilroy was here suggests travel, since this guy appeared all over Europe and the South Pacific, wherever the U.S. military was stationed. In 2008, when I was planning a new essay series, I was looking for a name for it. At the time, I could travel for free as an airline employee with U.S. Airways, and one of the places I visited was the U.S. Virgin Islands. In the town of Cruz Bay, on the island of St. John, I took a photo of a local business called Kilroy's Laundry and Dry Cleaning. The sign above the door had the familiar Kilroy icon peering out from a dryer. I replaced laundry with cafe and had the name of my own essay franchise. The trouble with essays is that no one reads them. My audience for virtually all of my writings has been minuscule, which has never bothered me much in the past, but I'd like my downloads to be appreciated eventually. Essay writing is also a lot of work because every word has to be perfect. If I misspell something or my grammar is wrong, it makes me look unprofessional. Writing is a precision medium, whereas a podcast is not. A podcast is more vernacular, just like talking to someone in person. You don't expect every word to come out perfectly so long as you get your point across. I also put my philosophical thoughts into videos, which are also more casual than writing. I am comfortable doing these videos because they're just like talking to another person. The main problem with them is that they are a lot of work and extremely time-consuming. I have to select the right location and get the lighting right and spend hours in the editing process. I found that I was spending 90% of my time on the mechanics of making the video and only 10% on the content. So I've settled on podcasts as my best medium for my data downloads. Unlike written essays, I can convey a lot of information in my tone of voice, and I can, in theory, engage the audience better than the written word. I can post my podcast to YouTube without having to go through the production hell of generating the video component. With a podcast, I have 3 output streams, each of which has its own audience. I have a traditional podcast, a YouTube video of the audio of that podcast, and a written script. The script appears in my philosophy blog. The podcast is housed at Podbean, and it should be available on most podcast platforms. The YouTube videos will appear on my Kilroy Cafe YouTube channel, which was my first YouTube channel and more recently has been a place where I put unedited travel videos. So these 3 output streams, blog, podcast, and YouTube, add up to a bigger audience than I would have with just a single stream. All of my recent Demographic Doom episodes are scripted, meaning that I write them out before I record them. I expect only a portion of my Kilroy Cafe episodes to be scripted, however. Some of them will be right off the top of my head, which works well for some topics where I have a pool of knowledge in my head and just need to spew it out. So what will I be covering in this podcast? It could be anything that doesn't fit into the Demographic Doom mandate, but I expect there to be 3 main categories: philosophy, oral histories, and life advice. And life advice will include travel advice based on my 13 years of intense travel since 2007. I have already recorded 2 videos that I call superficial guides. There's a superficial guide to Eastern Europe and another superficial guide to the Alaska Highway. The idea of a superficial guide is to give you a broad overview of a place rather than too many details. You can pick up all the details you need from the internet, but it's hard to find general evaluations of a place to help you decide, for example, whether you want to go there. I want to deliberately avoid pretty images in these programs because images can distract you from the big picture. Photography and videography can actually be quite deceptive because they only show you the idealized view of a place. So in future Kilroy Cafe episodes, I would give you an overview of, say, Western Europe or Canada. I don't have to script these episodes because they're all inside me. I just have to go from east to west or north to south and recall all the places I've been and my impressions of them. Another category I don't expect to script is oral histories. In the past 30 years, since my Area 51 era in the 1990s, I've had a lot of really interesting experiences, enough to write a dozen books. The trouble is I don't have time to write all those books, which have to be perfect just like an essay does. The next best thing is to just give this guy a microphone and let him talk, and I'm really good at that. I don't need a script because I can usually just go through events sequentially. I might, for example, talk about my Area 51 era or my family court era or any of a dozen other interesting experiences. Finally, this podcast could be a place for philosophical musings, just like the original Kilroy Cafe essays. These episodes will probably be scripted because I need to think them through before I record them. So how do I record my podcasts? Right now I'm using a handy H1N recorder for about $100, and it has a furry dead cat covering over the microphone so I don't make noises when I talk at the microphone. I'm editing on a professional video editor called Premiere Pro, and my Demographic Doom episodes have been heavily edited because I have very high standards for them, but I hope to minimize the editing for Kilroy Cafe. I don't have to edit as much if I'm just talking off the top of my head because you expect some stumbles and mistakes. In both of my podcasts, I'm bound to make factual mistakes, which really bother me because I like precision and I like correctness. Whenever I detect one of my own mistakes, I will note the error in the description in the YouTube version of the episode. You should also check the YouTube description for relevant links to other resources related to whatever topic I'm talking about. My output probably won't be too prolific, at least compared to other podcasters who put out a podcast every day. Based on my own past experience with demographic doom, I can't envision producing more than one Kilroy episode and one demographic doom episode per week, and probably fewer. I'm concerned with long-lasting quality, not quantity, although I imagine I will also churn out the quantity as well. So I think that's all you need to know about this podcast before we begin. Now I'll try to record a few episodes and we'll see how it goes.